September 23rd, 1884. The night Beatrice Langston's world burned. Flames consumed her bakery, the building collapsing in showers of sparks and ash. In the root cellar beneath, she held a wounded man in the darkness, listening to the roar of fire above, wondering if they would live or die. In his blood-stained hand, he still clutched a piece of cornbread, the bread she had baked that morning, the bread he had been buying every Wednesday and Saturday for 6 months. To understand how they arrived at this moment, how love and bread and stubbornness led two people into a stone cellar while the world burned above them, we must go back 3 months, to the summer when everything changed. The first thing you need to know about Beatrice Langston is that she learned to bake before she learned to read. Her mother, a freed slave with hands that could coax miracles from flour and water, had taught her that bread was more than food. It was memory made solid, love made visible, hope that could be held in human hands. The second thing you need to know is that Beatrice had spent her entire life being told she took up too much space. At 34 years old and 285 pounds, she moved through the world like a woman apologizing for her own existence. Her bakery, Langston's Hearth, sat on the eastern edge of Silverstone Ridge, Montana, squeezed between a hardware store and an abandoned stable. The building was narrow, barely 15 feet wide, with a single window that faced the dirt road running through town. Every morning, Beatrice rose at 3. The world was still dark, still quiet, still hers alone. She would light the cast-iron stove, feed it wood until it roared with heat, and begin the work that defined her life. Her hands moved through routines her mother had taught her 20 years before. Measure flour, add water, knead until the dough fought back, let it rise. Punch it down, let it rise again, shape it with care, bake it with patience. By 6, the smell of fresh bread would drift through the streets of Silverstone Ridge like an invitation. By 7, the first customers would arrive. They came for the bread, which was undeniably excellent. They did not come for conversation. Beatrice had learned long ago that her physical presence made people uncomfortable. They would place their coins on the counter, accept their wrapped loaves, and leave with minimal eye contact. Some days she could serve 20 customers without hearing her own voice once. She had accepted this isolation as the price of existence. Better to be alone than to endure the judgment in their eyes, the way they looked at her body first and her humanity second, if at all. But on a Wednesday morning in early June, something changed. A man walked into her bakery. He was unlike any customer she had seen before. Tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders so broad he had to turn slightly to fit through the doorframe. His hair was steel gray, his beard thick and unkempt. His face was all hard angles, cheekbones sharp enough to cut, eyes the color of winter sky. A scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw, white and raised against his weathered skin. He wore buckskin and fur despite the summer heat. His boots were handmade, worn from years of walking. He smelled like pine smoke and leather and something wild that had no name. Beatrice froze behind her counter. Mountain men came to town occasionally, but they usually went straight to the saloon or the general store. They did not visit bakeries. The man approached the counter with slow, deliberate steps. His eyes swept across the shelves, taking in the loaves of sourdough, the biscuits, the pies cooling on wire racks. Finally, his gaze settled on a small stack of cornbread in the corner. 2 pieces, he said. His voice was rough from disuse, each word carefully shaped, as if speaking required great effort. Beatrice wrapped 2 pieces of cornbread in brown paper, her hands trembling slightly. 20 cents. He placed a quarter on the counter, then added something else. A small gold coin, no bigger than her thumbnail. It was worth at least $2, 10 times what the bread cost. I cannot accept this, Beatrice said, pushing the gold coin back toward him. The man looked at her directly for the first time. His gaze was intense, penetrating, as if he could see through flesh and bone to the frightened woman hiding inside. He did not speak. He simply placed his large hand over hers, gently pushed the coin back toward her, and gathered his wrapped cornbread. Then he did something that would become ritual for the next 6 months. He walked to the small table by the window, sat down in the chair that groaned under his weight, and carefully unwrapped one piece of cornbread. He ate it slowly, methodically, his eyes fixed on the mountains visible through the glass. When he finished, he wrapped the second piece with the same care, placed it in his coat pocket, stood, and left without a word. Beatrice stood behind her counter, staring at the gold coin in her palm. It was real, solid, warm from his hand. She did not understand. 3 days later, he returned. Same time, same routine. 2 pieces of cornbread, one eaten at the window, one wrapped and taken away. Another gold coin left behind. This pattern continued through June and into July. Wednesdays and Saturdays, without fail. The man would arrive just before noon, purchase his cornbread, sit by the window, eat in silence, and depart. He never spoke beyond his initial 2-word order. He never smiled. He never explained the gold coins. Beatrice began to anticipate his visits. She found herself making the cornbread with extra care on Wednesdays and Saturdays, testing the texture, adjusting the honey, ensuring each batch was perfect. She told herself it was professional pride. But some small, honest part of her knew it was more than that. She wanted him to keep coming. Not because she believed anything would change, not because she imagined he saw her as anything other than the baker who made good cornbread, but because for those few minutes twice a week she felt less invisible. His presence, silent and strange as it was, made her feel seen in a way she had not experienced in years. One evening in late July, curiosity overcame her usual caution. After closing the bakery, she followed him. It was not difficult. The man moved with purpose but without haste, taking the north road out of town toward the mountains that loomed over Silverstone Ridge like ancient sentinels. Beatrice kept her distance, using the lengthening shadows for cover. Her body, usually a source of shame, proved useful now. She could hide behind trees, duck behind rocks, remain unseen. The man walked for nearly an hour, following a narrow trail that wound up into the foothills. Finally, he stopped at a small clearing. In the center stood a simple grave marker, a wooden cross with words carved into the crossbeam. From her hiding place behind a cluster of pine trees, Beatrice could not read the inscription. But she watched as the man knelt before the grave, carefully unwrapped the second piece of cornbread, and placed it at the base of the cross. Then he spoke. His voice carried through the still evening air, broken and raw. "I brought your favorite again, Miriam. The baker in town, she makes it just like you did. Sweet, with just enough salt to balance the honey. I sit by the window like we used to. I pretend you are there with me, telling me about your day, laughing at my silence." He paused. Beatrice heard him take a shaking breath. "I am sorry I could not save you. I am sorry I listened to that doctor who said you needed to change, to be smaller, to be less. I am sorry I made you believe your body was the problem when the problem was this world that could not see your value." His voice broke entirely. "I miss you. Every day I miss you. Beatrice pressed her hand against her mouth to stifle the sound of her own grief. She had not known this man's pain. She had not known his love. She had not known that somewhere in this hard world a man had loved a woman enough to bring her favorite bread to her grave for years after her death. She left before he could discover her presence, walking back to town through gathering darkness. That night, for the first time since her mother's death 8 years before, Beatrice wept. Not from sadness, though there was sadness, but from a strange, desperate hope. If this man had loved someone once, if he had seen past flesh to the soul beneath, then perhaps such love was possible. Perhaps she was not condemned to permanent solitude. Perhaps someone, somewhere, could see her. August brought heat that shimmered off the dirt roads and turned the bakery into an oven within an oven. Beatrice's dresses clung to her body, sweat soaking through the fabric within hours. She moved slower in the heat, her heart laboring in her chest, her breath coming short. One particularly brutal afternoon she closed the bakery early and climbed the narrow stairs to her living quarters above the shop. The room was sparse: a bed, a washstand, and a trunk for her clothes, a rocking chair by the window where she could watch the town settle into evening. She sat in that chair now, fanning herself with a piece of cardboard, when she noticed an envelope had been slipped under her door. Her name was written on the front in careful script. Inside, she found a single piece of paper with a message that stopped her heart. Dear Miss Langston, I will be arriving in Silverstone Ridge on August 20th to discuss a business proposition that I believe will be of significant interest to you. I have sampled your baked goods and find them to be of exceptional quality. I trust we can come to a mutually beneficial arrangement. Respectfully, Conrad Merik, Merik Development Company, Chicago, Illinois. August 20th was 3 days away. Beatrice read the letter 5 times, trying to understand what it meant. A business proposition from Chicago. Someone had been sampling her goods. Someone thought they were exceptional. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine. Perhaps this Conrad Merik wanted to buy her recipes. Perhaps he wanted to distribute her bread to larger markets. Perhaps this was the opportunity that would finally lift her from the edge of poverty where she had balanced for so many years. But deeper instincts whispered warnings. Men like Conrad Merik, men from Chicago with development companies, did not travel to remote Montana towns to help struggling bakers. They came because they wanted something. The question was, what? She would find out soon enough. August 20th arrived with cloudless skies and oppressive heat. Beatrice rose at her usual 3 in the morning, but instead of beginning her baking routine, she bathed carefully, dressed in her best Sunday clothes, a dark blue dress her mother had made years ago, and prepared herself for whatever was coming. At precisely 10 o'clock, a carriage pulled up in front of her bakery. It was expensive, polished wood and brass fittings that gleamed in the morning sun. A driver in formal livery jumped down to open the door, and Conrad Merik stepped out. He was not what Beatrice had expected. She had imagined someone older, gray and weathered, like the businessman who occasionally passed through town. But Conrad Merik was perhaps 42, with dark hair slicked back with pomade, a face that was handsome in the way expensive things are handsome, carefully maintained, and symmetrical. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Beatrice earned in 6 months. His shoes were so polished they reflected the sun like mirrors. He entered the bakery with the confidence of a man accustomed to doors opening when he wanted them to. His eyes swept across the small space, cataloging, measuring, calculating worth. "Miss Langston," he said, extending a hand. His handshake was firm, brief, calculated. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "I do not recall agreeing to anything, Mr. Merik, but you are here, so I am listening." A smile flickered across his face, there and gone. "Direct. I appreciate that. Shall we sit?" They sat at the table by the window. Beatrice poured coffee from the pot she kept warm on the stove. Conrad accepted the cup, but did not drink, simply held it as if it were a prop in a performance. "I will be honest with you, Miss Langston. I have been traveling through these mountain towns for the past year, looking for opportunities. Quality establishments that, with the right investment and guidance, could become something extraordinary. And you believe my bakery is one of those establishments?" "I know it is." He leaned forward, his eyes bright with practiced enthusiasm. "I have sampled your bread. I have spoken to people in this town. You have genuine skill, authentic quality. But you are limited by location, by resources, by scale." Beatrice sipped her coffee, saying nothing. Conrad continued, "I am building a network, Miss Langston, a chain of hotels along the new railroad lines. Each hotel will need a bakery, a source of reliable, high-quality goods. I want your recipes to form the foundation of that operation. I want you to become the master baker for the Merik Hotel collection." The words hung in the air, seductive and dangerous. "What exactly are you proposing?" Beatrice asked. Conrad pulled a document from his jacket pocket, unfolded it on the table. I am prepared to purchase your bakery for $1,500. You would remain as head baker with a guaranteed salary of $100 per month. Your recipes would be standardized across all our locations. You would have financial security for the rest of your life. $1,500. Beatrice's breath caught. It was more money than she had ever imagined possessing. It could pay off every debt, repair every crack in her life's foundation, provide a cushion against the lean winters and failed harvests that constantly threatened to pull her under. There would be conditions, naturally, Conrad said. His tone remained smooth, but something shifted in his eyes. We need to maintain a certain image across all our properties. Clean, modern, professional, aspirational. What does that mean? It means you would need to make some personal changes. He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. Miss Langston, I respect you too much to be dishonest. In business, presentation matters. Our guests expect to see someone who embodies health and refinement, someone who inspires them to be their best selves. Understanding crashed over Beatrice like cold water. You want me to lose weight. I want you to transform, Conrad corrected gently. We would provide resources, a dietitian, a personal trainer, a complete wardrobe, everything you would need to become not just a baker, but the face of our brand. Think of it as an investment in yourself. Beatrice looked down at her hands, large and strong and scarred from years of work. Hands that had kneaded thousands of loaves, hands that had built something from nothing. How much would I need to lose? She asked quietly. Ideally, 100 pounds within 6 months. 100 pounds, half her body weight in 6 months. And if I refuse? Conrad's smile returned, but this time it did not reach his eyes. Then I will make the same offer to other bakers in other towns. Business will continue. Opportunities will pass. Life will go on. He paused. But I should mention that I have already secured the lease on the building across the street. If you decline my offer, I will be opening a competing bakery there within the month. I believe in this location, Miss Langston. The question is whether you will be part of its future or part of its past. The threat was clear. Accept his terms and transform yourself, or be driven out of business by a competitor with unlimited resources. Beatrice stood abruptly. I need time to consider. Of course. Conrad rose smoothly, straightening his jacket. I will be in town for 2 weeks, finalizing other investments. Take all the time you need. But Miss Langston, his use of her first name felt invasive somehow, opportunities like this do not come twice. He left his card on the table and saw himself out. Beatrice stood alone in her bakery, staring at the small rectangle of pressed paper with its elegant lettering. Conrad Merik, Merik Development Company, building the future of American commerce. Through the window she watched his carriage roll away, leaving a cloud of dust hanging in the still air. That evening she climbed to her room above the bakery and sat by the window as the sun set over the mountains. The sky turned orange, then pink, then purple, then finally dark. Stars emerged one by one, so thick they looked like spilled sugar across black cloth. She thought about Conrad Merik's offer, the money, the security, the guarantee that she would never again wake up terrified about how to pay rent or buy flour or survive another brutal Montana winter. All she had to do was become someone else. All she had to do was spend 6 months starving herself, punishing her body, transforming into a shape that other people found acceptable. All she had to do was admit that she had been wrong to exist as herself. Beatrice pulled out her mother's recipe book, a slim volume held together with string and stubborn hope. The pages were stained with decades of use, margins filled with her mother's cramped handwriting, notes about temperature and timing, observations about the particular qualities of different flours, a lifetime of knowledge distilled into recipes that were less instructions than conversations across time. She opened to a random page and found her mother's cornbread recipe, the one she made every Wednesday and Saturday. At the bottom, in her mother's handwriting, were words Beatrice had read 1,000 times but never fully understood until now. This recipe cannot be rushed or altered. It demands you meet it on its own terms. The baker who tries to cut corners will end up with something that looks right, but tastes wrong. Better to make it properly or not at all. The same is true for living. Beatrice closed the book and pressed it against her chest. She did not sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed, watching shadows move across the ceiling, while her mind churned through Conrad Merik's offer like grain through a mill. The numbers kept circling back. Enough money to never worry again. Enough to finally feel safe, but safety came with a price she did not know if she could pay. By the time dawn arrived, Beatrice had made no decisions except to continue doing what she always did. She rose, dressed, descended the stairs, and began baking. Her hands moved through familiar motions, while her thoughts remained tangled, kneading doubt and hope together until she could not tell them apart. The morning customers came and went. The minister's wife with her pinched expression and exact change, the miners with their coal-blackened hands and tired eyes, the school teacher with her careful, bird-like movements. At noon the door opened and the mountain man stepped inside. Gideon. She had learned his name by asking quietly around town. Gideon Frost, a man who had lived in the mountains for 12 years, coming to town only for supplies, a man with a dead wife and a story no one would tell her completely. He approached the counter as always. 2 pieces. Beatrice wrapped the cornbread with hands that trembled slightly. As she handed it to him, their fingers brushed. The contact lasted only a moment, but in that moment Beatrice felt something shift, a recognition, a question forming in the space between them. Gideon placed his quarter on the counter, then he added the gold coin, as he always did. "Why?" Beatrice heard herself ask. The word escaped before she could stop it. Gideon paused. He looked at her directly, and for the first time in 6 months of silent visits, he spoke more than 2 words. "Because your bread tastes like love," he said quietly. "And I have been without love for a very long time." Then he carried his cornbread to the table by the window and sat down. But today, instead of eating immediately, he turned to look at her. "There is a man in town," Gideon said. "A man from Chicago. He is asking questions about you, about your bakery, about whether you own the land or just lease it." Beatrice's heart began to race. "Conrad Merik." "Yes." Gideon's jaw tightened. "I know his type. I have seen men like him before. They come to places like this looking for opportunities, which means they come looking for people they can use or destroy." He paused. "Be careful, Miss Langston. Whatever he is offering you, there is a price attached that he has not mentioned yet." Before Beatrice could respond, Gideon stood and walked to the counter. He set down his wrapped cornbread and reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small leather pouch worn soft with age and placed it beside the cornbread. Inside the pouch, Beatrice would later discover, were $2,500 in gold coin, carefully wrapped in cloth. "I need you to keep this safe for me," he said. "If something happens, if I do not come back, I need you to take it to the sheriff and tell him everything I am about to tell you." Beatrice stared at the pouch. "I do not understand." Gideon looked toward the window, toward the mountains beyond. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of years. 12 years ago, my wife Miriam died of heart disease. The doctor said her weight was killing her. He put her on a diet so severe it destroyed her health faster than the disease. She died believing her body had betrayed her, that she was fundamentally wrong, that her existence was a burden to everyone who loved her. He turned back to Beatrice, and his winter sky eyes were bright with unshed tears. She was not wrong. The world was wrong, and I was wrong for not telling her that every single day, for not fighting harder against the voices that told her to be smaller, to be less, to apologize for taking up space. Gideon picked up the leather pouch and held it out to Beatrice. Miriam left a will, a secret will that her family tried to destroy. In it, she left $5,000 to a woman she saw in a dream, a woman with dark skin and gifted hands who would one day open a bakery in this town, a woman who would need help standing up to men who wanted to control her. Beatrice's hands shook as she accepted the pouch. "I do not know what you are saying." "Conrad Merik is Miriam's nephew," Gideon said. "His father was Miriam's younger brother. He knows about the will. He knows you are the woman Miriam described, and he will do anything to make sure you never claim that inheritance, because if you die or abandon your bakery within 15 years, the money goes to him instead." The world tilted. Beatrice gripped the counter to steady herself. "That is why he wants you to lose weight," Gideon continued, his voice hard now. "He is betting your body will fail you the way Miriam's failed her. He is betting you will die trying to become what he demands. And if you do not die, he will make your life so difficult that you give up and leave. Either way, he wins." Beatrice looked down at the leather pouch in her hands. "Why are you telling me this? Why do you care?" Gideon was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I failed Miriam. I let the world convince her she was wrong, instead of telling her every day that she was perfect and precious exactly as she was. I will not watch another woman I care about be destroyed by the same lies." "Another woman I care about." The words hung in the air between them. Beatrice felt tears burning in her eyes. "You do not know me." "I know enough," Gideon said. He walked to a shelf built into the far wall and pulled down a wooden box, weathered and scarred from years of handling. The lid creaked as he opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, each one folded with careful precision and tied with thin brown string. The paper had yellowed slightly with age, but the ink remained dark and clear. 61 letters, Gideon said quietly, not meeting her eyes. "One for every month I have been watching over you. 5 years and 1 month." Beatrice stared at the box. "I do not understand." "I wrote to you," Gideon continued, his voice rough with emotion. "Every month, after I visited your bakery, I would return to this cabin and write down everything I wanted to say but could not speak aloud. Everything I observed, everything I felt, everything I wished I had the courage to tell you." He lifted the box and held it out to her. "Every time I came to town, I carried one of these letters in my pocket. I stood outside your bakery door, trying to find the courage to leave it for you, but I was afraid you would think me mad, afraid my attention would bring you harm if Conrad discovered our connection. So I kept them all, kept writing them month after month, even though I knew you might never read them." Beatrice's hands trembled as she accepted the box. The weight of it, the physical evidence of 5 years of silent devotion, made her throat tight. "Read them or burn them," Gideon said. "They are yours now, but know that every word is true." With shaking fingers, Beatrice untied the string on the first letter. The date written at the top read, June 1879, 5 years ago, the first month Gideon had come to her bakery. She read aloud, her voice breaking, "My dear Beatrice, though you do not know that I call you by your given name in the privacy of my thoughts. Today, I watched you through the window as you sang while kneading dough. Your voice carried a hymn I recognized from my childhood, one my own mother used to sing. You have her same gentle strength, the kind that persists even when the world offers nothing but hardship in return. I do not know if you are aware of how the light falls across your face when you work, how your expression softens with concentration, how your hands move with such practiced grace that it seems less like labor and more like prayer. You are beautiful in ways that have nothing to do with flesh and everything to do with spirit. I wish I had the courage to tell you this. Perhaps someday I will. Until then, I remain yours in silent watch. G." Tears blurred Beatrice's vision. She opened the second letter, then the third, reading passages at random. From August 1879, "You were kind to the widow Peterson today, even though she could only afford half a loaf. You wrapped a full loaf and told her the rest was day-old bread you needed to clear from inventory. It was not. It was fresh from the oven. You sacrificed profit for compassion. This is why I love you." From December 1880. "The winter has been hard on you. I can see it in the way you move more slowly, in the dark circles beneath your eyes. I wish I could help. I wish I could carry your burdens for even one day. But I know you would refuse such help, would see it as charity rather than love. So I continue to watch, to bear witness, to ensure that if you fall, someone will be there to catch you. From March 1882, you sang a different hymn today, Amazing Grace. When you reached the line about a wretch like me, your voice caught. You stopped kneading for a moment, your hands pressed flat against the dough, your head bowed. I wanted to break down your door and tell you that you are not a wretch. You are grace itself, amazing and undeserved and precious beyond measure. Beatrice could not continue reading. She closed the letter and pressed the box against her chest, overwhelmed by the depth of feeling contained in these pages. 5 years, she whispered. You have been loving me for 5 years. Longer, Gideon admitted. The letters only began after the first month. I loved you from the first moment I saw you, but it took me a month to find the words. I know you rise at 3 every morning to make bread for people who barely acknowledge you exist. I know you sing when you knead dough, old hymns your mother taught you. I know you sit by your window every night and watch the stars like you are searching for answers in the sky. I know you are lonely and strong and tired of fighting alone. How do you know these things? Because for 6 months I have been watching over you, Gideon said simply. Not to intrude, not to demand anything, just to make sure you are safe. Because this world is cruel to women like you, and someone needed to bear witness to your worth. Beatrice could not speak, could not breathe, could not process what she was hearing. Gideon picked up his cornbread. The pouch contains proof of Miriam's will. If anything happens to me, take it to the sheriff. Tell him Conrad Merik is trying to steal your inheritance. Tell him I said to dig up the truth. Where are you going? To make sure Merik understands that you are not alone, that you have protection, that if he tries to hurt you, there will be consequences. Please, Beatrice said, do not do anything dangerous. Gideon looked at her one last time. In his eyes she saw things she had never expected to see directed at her. Tenderness, respect. Something that might have been love if she dared to name it. Everything worth doing is dangerous, Miss Langston. I learned that too late to save Miriam. But I am learning it in time to fight for you. Then he walked out of the bakery into the bright August afternoon, and Beatrice stood alone with a leather pouch full of secrets and a heart full of impossible hope. That night she opened the pouch. Inside she found documents, legal papers detailing Miriam Frost's last will and testament. She found letters, dozens of them, written in a woman's careful hand. She found a photograph, yellowed with age, showing a large woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, standing beside a younger version of Gideon Frost. And she found a note written in fresh ink, clearly added recently by Gideon himself. I have loved you for 6 months. I will love you for 6 months more. I will love you for whatever time we have, in whatever form that love can take. You do not have to love me back. You do not have to change. You do not have to be anything other than exactly who you are. But know this, you are seen. You are valued. You are worth fighting for. Always, G. Beatrice read the note 3 times. Then she pressed it against her chest and wept. Not from sadness, not from fear, but from the overwhelming recognition that somewhere in this hard world, someone had chosen to see her. Not her body, not her limitations, not her failures or fears. Her. The next morning, Beatrice woke to the sound of hammering. She rushed to her window and looked out to see workers building a frame across the street, right where Conrad Merik had said he would open a competing bakery. A sign already hung from the scaffolding. Coming soon, Merik's fine baked goods, opening September 1st. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks before Conrad's competition opened. But as Beatrice watched the workers hammer and saw, she felt something she had not felt in years. Not fear, not resignation, but anger. Clean, pure, righteous anger. Conrad Merik thought he could manipulate her, thought he could use her desperation against her, thought he could force her to choose between her body and her livelihood. He was wrong. Beatrice dressed quickly and walked to the sheriff's office. She brought the leather pouch and every document inside it. She told the sheriff everything Gideon had revealed. She demanded an investigation into Conrad Merik's claims and business practices. The sheriff, a weathered man named Holt, who had known Beatrice since she first arrived in town 8 years ago, listened carefully. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and regarded her with something that might have been respect. "You are making a powerful enemy, Miss Langston." "I already have a powerful enemy," Beatrice replied. "Now I am simply refusing to make it easy for him." Sheriff Holt nodded slowly. "I will look into this, but Merik has money and connections. This will not be simple." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Beatrice said, echoing Gideon's words. She returned to her bakery and spent the day baking with fierce concentration. When Gideon arrived at noon for his cornbread, she had something waiting for him. Not just the usual 2 pieces, but an entire loaf, wrapped carefully and still warm from the oven. "Thank you," she said simply. Gideon looked at her, understanding everything those 2 words contained. "You are welcome. I spoke to the sheriff." "Good. Conrad will retaliate." "I know. This could become dangerous." "It already is dangerous," Gideon said quietly. "The question is whether we face that danger alone or together." Beatrice met his eyes. "Together." For the first time in 6 months, Gideon smiled. It transformed his entire face, softening the hard angles, bringing light to those winter sky eyes. "Then we fight," he said. But as Beatrice would discover in the days to come, Conrad Merik's retaliation would arrive faster and more viciously than either of them anticipated. Because that very night, as Beatrice closed her bakery and prepared for bed, a rider arrived at Conrad's hotel with urgent news. The telegram read, "Investigation initiated. Sheriff Holt requesting documentation of Miriam Frost's estate. Recommend immediate action." Conrad Merik stood in his expensive hotel room holding the telegram, his face expressionless. Then he walked to his desk, pulled out a sheet of paper, and wrote a single sentence. "Eliminate the problem. No witnesses, no mistakes." He sealed the message, paid the writer double to deliver it immediately, and poured himself a whiskey. Somewhere in the mountains above Silverstone Ridge, Gideon Frost sat by his campfire, unaware that his name had just been added to a list of people Conrad Merik intended to erase. And in her small room above the bakery, Beatrice Langston fell asleep holding Gideon's note against her heart, dreaming of a future where she did not have to choose between love and survival. She did not know that in exactly 4 months she would be kneeling in the snow, holding that same man in her arms while his blood soaked into the frozen ground. She did not know that the fight she had just chosen would cost her everything she had built. She did not know that the price of standing firm would be paid in fire and blood and loss. But she would learn. They both would. Because Conrad Merik had just declared war, and in war everyone pays. September arrived in Silverstone Ridge with the kind of crisp, golden mornings that made you believe the world could be beautiful, even when everything was falling apart. Beatrice Langston stood at the window of her bakery, watching workers put the finishing touches on Conrad Merik's competing establishment across the street. The sign gleamed in the early light, Merik's Fine Baked Goods. Through the sparkling clean windows, she could see marble countertops, glass display cases, and equipment so new it still had manufacturer's tags attached. Her own bakery, by comparison, looked exactly like what it was. A narrow, weathered building with mismatched furniture, a temperamental stove, and floors worn smooth by years of use. Everything in her shop had a story. Everything had been earned through sweat and sacrifice. But to anyone walking past, comparing the two establishments, the choice would seem obvious. New and shining always defeated old and worn. At least, that was what Conrad Merik was counting on. The grand opening was scheduled for September 15th, just 2 weeks away. Beatrice had spent the intervening days since her conversation with Gideon preparing for battle. She had reorganized her recipes, improved her displays, and lowered her prices as much as she could afford. But deep down, she knew it would not be enough. Conrad had unlimited resources. She had only stubbornness and skill. It was not a fair fight. But Beatrice had learned long ago that life was not interested in fairness. Gideon had not returned to the bakery since the day he revealed Conrad's plan. Beatrice told herself this was for the best. If Conrad discovered their connection, it would only give him another weapon to use against her. Better that Gideon stayed hidden in the mountains, safe from whatever retaliation Conrad might devise. But she missed him. She missed the quiet companionship of his presence, missed the way he ate her cornbread with such reverence, as if each bite were a prayer, missed knowing that someone in this world saw her value. But on the morning of September 10th, Beatrice arrived at her bakery before dawn to find the door standing slightly ajar. Her heart hammering, she pushed it open. The destruction was surgical. Her flour barrels had been opened, lamp oil poured into each one. 50 pounds of flour ruined. Her yeast containers stood open, the cultures dying. And worst of all, her sourdough starter, maintained for 8 years, had been dumped into the sink and washed away. Beatrice stood in the center of her violated bakery, understanding with cold clarity Conrad Merik had struck first. She spent the next hours cleaning what she could, her hands shaking with rage and fear. She sent urgent word to suppliers for emergency flour and yeast. The sourdough starter could not be replaced, but perhaps she could rebuild from scratch. Later that morning, after she had salvaged what little remained, an unexpected visitor arrived at her door. A woman stood at the door of the bakery, thin to the point of gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes and hands that trembled as she knocked. She wore a faded dress that had been mended multiple times. Her hair, once blonde, was streaked with premature gray. "Miss Langston?" the woman asked. Her voice was hoarse, as if she had been crying. "Yes. How can I help you?" The woman glanced over her shoulder, checking the street, then stepped quickly inside. "My name is Ida Thornton. I need to speak with you privately. It is a matter of life and death." Beatrice locked the bakery door and led Ida to the back room, away from the windows. Up close, she could see that the woman had been beautiful once, before whatever hardship she carried had carved away everything soft. "What is this about?" Beatrice asked. Ida's hands twisted together in her lap. "I am the baker Conrad Merik hired to run the shop across the street." Beatrice went very still. "I do not want to do this," Ida continued quickly. "I do not want to destroy your business. I do not want any part of Conrad Merik's schemes, but I have no choice." "There is always a choice. Not when someone has your child." Ida's voice broke. "Not when they promise to kill him if you refuse." The words landed like stones in still water. Beatrice felt the world tilt slightly. "Tell me everything," she said quietly. And Ida did. Her husband had died 9 months ago in a mining accident, leaving her with debts and a 6-year-old son named Samuel. She had tried to manage, taking in laundry and mending, but it was not enough. The debts grew. The men who held those debts grew impatient. Then one day Conrad Merik appeared at her door like an answer to prayer. He offered to pay off everything she owed. He offered her a job managing his new bakery in Silverstone Ridge. He offered a fresh start. The only condition was that she had to drive Beatrice out of business within 3 months. Ida had agreed. What choice did she have? Her son was hungry, her creditors were threatening violence. Conrad Merik was offering salvation. But 2 weeks ago, everything changed. "Samuel disappeared," Ida whispered. "I woke up and he was gone. No sign of forced entry, no ransom note, nothing. I went to the sheriff, but before I could report it, one of Merik's men found me. He gave me a message." "What message?" "That Samuel was safe. That he would remain safe as long as I did exactly what Mr. Merik instructed. That if I went to the authorities or tried to run, Samuel would be sold to a work camp in California and I would never see him again." Ida's tears fell freely now. "He sends me photographs every few days. Samuel in a locked room, Samuel crying, Samuel holding a newspaper, so I know the pictures are recent. Each photograph comes with the same message: obey or lose him forever." Beatrice felt rage rising in her chest, hot and clean. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I cannot do it anymore," Ida said desperately. "I cannot sleep. I cannot eat. Every time I look at the ovens across the street, all I see is the life I am about to destroy. Your life. And I keep thinking, what kind of world am I saving my son for if I teach him that survival requires crushing other people?" She looked at Beatrice with raw, desperate eyes. "Help me, please. I do not know what to do. I do not know how to save Samuel without destroying you, but there has to be a way. There has to be." Beatrice stood and walked to the window. Outside she could see the gleaming facade of Merik's bakery. She could imagine Conrad Merik in his expensive hotel room, moving people around like pieces on a chessboard, confident in his power, certain of his victory. He had calculated every angle, every pressure point, every weakness he could exploit. But he had made one critical mistake. He had assumed that desperate women would turn on each other rather than recognize their common enemy. Beatrice turned back to Ida. "Where is Samuel being held?" "I do not know. The photographs show only a room. No windows. No identifying features." "Who delivers the photographs?" "A different man each time. They find me wherever I am. It is like Merik has eyes everywhere." Beatrice thought for a moment. "The next time they deliver a photograph, I want you to accept it as always. But I want you to ask a question. Ask when you can see Samuel in person. Tell them you need to verify he is truly safe before the bakery opens." "They will refuse." "Probably, but their refusal will tell us something, and if by chance they agree, we will learn where he is being kept." Beatrice moved closer, her voice firm. "Ida, I am not going to let Conrad Merik destroy either of us. We are going to get your son back. We are going to expose what Merik has done. And we are going to do it together. How? He has money, power, connections. We have nothing." "We have each other," Beatrice said. "And we have someone else who wants to see Conrad Merik pay for his crimes." "Who?" "A man who has been waiting 12 years for justice." That evening, Beatrice climbed the mountain trail to Gideon's cabin. The journey was easier this time. Her body remembered the path. Her legs were stronger. She arrived as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Gideon was splitting wood outside his cabin. He stopped when he saw her, the axe frozen mid-swing. "Beatrice," he said her name like a prayer. "We need to talk." Inside the cabin, by the light of an oil lamp, Beatrice told Gideon everything Ida had revealed. She watched his expression darken as she described Samuel's captivity, the photographs, the threats. When she finished, Gideon was silent for a long time. Finally he spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "Conrad is holding a child hostage to force a woman to commit economic violence against another woman. This is beyond business competition. This is cruelty for its own sake. Can you help us find Samuel?" "I can try." Gideon stood and pulled a map from a shelf, spreading it across the table. "Merik is staying at the Grand Hotel in town. He would not keep the boy there, too many witnesses, but he needs somewhere close enough to maintain control, somewhere isolated where a child's cries would not draw attention." His finger traced a circle around Silverstone Ridge. "There are 3 abandoned mining camps within 10 miles, 2 old homesteads, and a warehouse on the edge of town that burned last year. The structure is still standing, but everyone thinks it is unsafe. How do we search all those places without alerting Merik? We do not search. We make him come to us." Gideon looked at Beatrice. "We need to make Conrad believe his plan is working perfectly, that Ida is following orders, that you are about to be crushed. When he is confident and complacent, that is when he will make a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "He will want to witness his victory. Men like Conrad do not just want to win, they want to see their enemies broken. When your bakery fails, when you are forced to close, he will come to gloat. And when he does, we will be watching. We will see where he goes after, who he talks to. That will lead us to Samuel." Beatrice shook her head. "I cannot let my bakery fail. It is all I have. It is my mother's legacy." Gideon reached across the table and took her hand. His touch was warm, calloused. gentle. You will not truly fail. We will stage a failure, make it look like you are closing. Then, once we have Samuel safe and Conrad exposed, you reopen. And if the plan does not work, if I close and cannot reopen, then I will use every dollar I have saved to help you start again, Gideon said quietly. I will build you a new bakery with my own hands if necessary. But Beatrice, we cannot let Conrad win, not just because of what he is doing to you and Ida, but because if he succeeds here, he will do this again in another town to another woman. Someone has to stop him. It might as well be us. Beatrice looked at their joined hands. She thought about her mother, who had taught her that bread was memory made solid, love made visible. She thought about Miriam Frost, who had died believing her body was wrong instead of knowing the world was wrong. She thought about Ida's son Samuel, 6 years old, and terrified in a locked room. She thought about all the women who had been told to be smaller, quieter, less. All the women who had apologized for existing. All right, she said, tell me what to do. Over the next 3 days, Beatrice and Gideon executed their plan with careful precision. Beatrice raised her prices slightly, making her goods less competitive. She reduced her hours, creating the impression of a struggling business. She let it be known around town that she was considering selling the bakery and leaving Silverstone Ridge. Meanwhile, Ida played her role perfectly. She opened Merik's bakery on September 15th with great fanfare. She sold bread at prices Beatrice could not match. She smiled at customers and told them about the superior ingredients and modern techniques Mr. Merik had taught her. And each night she met secretly with Beatrice to report what she had learned. On the 4th night after the opening, Ida arrived at Beatrice's back door with urgent news. I asked about seeing Samuel, she whispered. At first they refused, just like you said. But then today, one of Merik's men told me that if I meet certain sales targets this week, Mr. Merik will arrange a brief visit. Did he say where? No, but he said it would be soon, within days. Beatrice felt hope flare in her chest. Then we wait, and we watch. The waiting was torture. Each day Beatrice watched customers stream past her bakery to enter Ida's gleaming shop across the street. Each day her sales dwindled further. Each day the fiction they were creating became a little more real. And each day she wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. On September 22nd, exactly 1 week after Merik's bakery opened, Beatrice sold only 3 loaves of bread. It was her worst day in 8 years of business. That night, Conrad Merik came to visit. He arrived just before closing, entering the bakery with the satisfied smile of a man who had predicted the future and watched it unfold exactly as planned. Miss Langston, he said, looking around at the empty shop, I heard business has been difficult lately. I wanted to offer my condolences. Beatrice forced herself to meet his eyes. What do you want, Mr. Merik? I want to help. He pulled a document from his jacket. My original offer still stands. $1,500 for your bakery, though given current circumstances, you might consider it generous. And the conditions? Do I still need to lose 100 pounds? Conrad's smile widened. Actually, no. I have reconsidered that requirement. I have found a baker who better suits my needs. You would be free to take the money and start over somewhere else. Somewhere your talents might be better appreciated. It was everything Beatrice could do not to spit in his face. He was offering her escape with one hand while holding a child hostage with the other. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I need time to think, she said. Of course, but do not take too long. I would hate for you to lose everything when you could walk away with something. After he left, Beatrice stood alone in her darkening bakery and allowed herself one moment of despair, because she realized with sudden clarity that even if they rescued Samuel, even if they exposed Conrad's crimes, she had still lost something precious. The customers who had abandoned her would not all return. The trust she had built over 8 years had been shattered in 7 days. Her business had been wounded in ways that might never fully heal. But then she remembered Gideon's words. Everything worth doing is dangerous. She locked the door, climbed the stairs to her room, and prepared for what would come next. The following morning, Gideon was waiting outside her bakery before dawn. "He is moving," Gideon said without preamble. "I have been watching Merik's hotel. Last night one of his men left in a wagon. I followed him to the old burned warehouse at the edge of town. He went inside for approximately 10 minutes, then left. I waited until he was gone, then approached carefully. I heard a child crying in it." Beatrice's heart leaped. "Samuel?" "I believe so, but Beatrice, there is more." Gideon's expression was grave. "After the man left the warehouse, I continued following him. He did not return to the hotel. He went to a house on the outskirts of town and met with 2 other men. I recognized one of them. His name is Caleb Vance. He has a reputation as an enforcer, someone you hire when you want violence done quietly." "What are you saying?" "I am saying that Conrad is planning something beyond economic competition. I think he intends to ensure you cannot rebuild even if you wanted to. I think he is planning to remove you as a threat permanently." Fear coursed through Beatrice, cold and sharp. "When?" "Soon. Perhaps tonight, after Ida's visit with Samuel. Once Conrad has secured Ida's complete cooperation, you become expendable." "Then we move today, now. We get Samuel out of that warehouse before Conrad can use him as leverage anymore." Gideon nodded. "I will handle the rescue. I need you to stay visible in town. Go about your normal routine. Give Conrad no reason to suspect we know about Samuel's location. I want to help." "You will help by being safe," Gideon said firmly. "Beatrice, I cannot do what needs to be done if I am worrying about your safety. Please, trust me." Beatrice wanted to argue, but she saw the fear in his eyes, fear for her, and she understood. He had failed to protect Miriam. He would not survive failing to protect Beatrice too. "Be careful," she whispered. Gideon pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. She felt his heart beating against her chest, steady and strong. When he spoke, his lips brushed her hair. "I will come back to you. I promise." Then he released her and disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness. Beatrice opened her bakery as usual. She made bread with shaking hands. She served the few customers who still came. She watched the clock, counting minutes, counting hours, praying that Gideon would succeed. At noon, Ida crossed the street and entered the bakery. Her face was pale. "They told me I can see Samuel this evening," she said quietly. 6 o'clock at the burned warehouse." "I know. Gideon is there now," Ida gasped. "What?" "No, if Merik discovers someone is interfering, he will kill Samuel. Gideon knows what he is doing. Trust him." But even as Beatrice said the words, doubt gnawed at her. What if something went wrong? What if Conrad had anticipated their move? What if Gideon was walking into a trap? The afternoon crept by with agonizing slowness. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. At 5:30, a boy ran into the bakery, breathless. "Miss Langston, there is trouble at the warehouse. Someone said they heard gunshots." Beatrice's blood turned to ice. She grabbed her shawl and ran. The warehouse was at the eastern edge of town, a skeletal structure of charred wood and collapsed roof beams. As Beatrice approached, she could see a small crowd gathering, drawn by the sound of violence. She pushed through them and saw Gideon. He was on his knees in the dirt, bleeding from his shoulder. 3 men surrounded him. One of them was Caleb Vance, the enforcer Gideon had identified. Vance held a pistol aimed at Gideon's head. In Gideon's arms, protected by his body, was a small boy with dark hair and terrified eyes. "Samuel." "Let the boy go," Vance said coldly. "Mr. Merik's orders. The boy stays. You die. Simple." "No." Gideon's voice was steady, despite the blood soaking his shirt. "You will have to kill us both. And everyone here is watching. How will you explain that to the sheriff?" Vance glanced at the growing crowd, uncertainty flickering across his face. That was when Beatrice stepped forward. "Caleb Vance," she said loudly, her voice carrying across the crowd. You are holding a child hostage on Conrad Merik's orders. Everyone here is a witness. If you pull that trigger, you will hang." Vance swung the pistol toward her. "Stay back, woman, or you join him." But Beatrice kept walking. "You want to know why Conrad Merik wants me destroyed? Because 12 years ago, a woman named Miriam Frost left me an inheritance that rightfully belongs to me. $5,000. Conrad has been trying to steal it by forcing me out of business or killing me outright. That is why he hired Ida Thornton under false pretenses. That is why he kidnapped her son. That is why he sent you to kill Gideon Frost." The crowd murmured. Sheriff Holt pushed through to the front. "What is the meaning of this?" the sheriff demanded. Beatrice pointed at Vance. "This man and his associates are holding Samuel Thornton hostage. They shot Gideon Frost when he attempted a rescue. And they are all acting on orders from Conrad Merik, who is currently staying at the Grand Hotel." Vance's face went white. He looked from the sheriff to the crowd to his own men, calculating his chances. Then he made his decision. He lowered the pistol. "I want immunity," Vance said. "Full immunity in exchange for testimony against Merik. I can prove everything. Documents, letters, payment records, all of it." Sheriff Holt nodded slowly. "We can discuss terms. But first, drop the weapon." Vance dropped the pistol. His men followed suit. Beatrice ran to Gideon. He was still holding Samuel, still bleeding, but alive. She helped him to his feet. "You came," he said, his voice weak. "Of course I came. I told you to stay safe. I never promised I would listen." Despite everything, despite the blood and fear and chaos, Gideon smiled. Ida rushed forward and gathered Samuel into her arms, sobbing. The boy clung to her, crying but unharmed. Sheriff Holt organized his deputies to arrest Vance and his men. Then he turned to Beatrice. "I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning." And she did. Standing there in the dirt outside the burned warehouse, with Gideon's blood on her hands and the whole town listening, Beatrice told the truth. About Conrad's manipulation, about Ida's coercion, about Miriam's hidden will, about 12 years of secrets and lies. When she finished, Sheriff Holt's face was grim. "I will bring Merik in for questioning tonight, but Miss Langston, you should know that men like him do not go down easy. He will deny everything. He will have expensive lawyers. This will be a long fight." "I know," Beatrice said, "but I am not running anymore." The sheriff nodded, then went to organize the arrests. As the crowd dispersed and deputies led Vance away, Beatrice helped Gideon to the doctor's office. The bullet had passed through his shoulder muscle without hitting bone or major vessels. The doctor bandaged him, gave him laudanum for the pain, and told him to rest. But instead of resting, Gideon walked with Beatrice back to her bakery. Night had fallen. The street was dark except for lamplight spilling from windows. They walked slowly, Gideon leaning on Beatrice for support. "You should not have come," he said quietly. "If Vance had panicked, if he had fired, then we would have faced it together," Beatrice replied. "You do not get to protect me by sacrificing yourself, Gideon. That is not how this works." They reached the bakery. Beatrice unlocked the door and helped Gideon inside. He sat heavily in the chair by the window, his face pale with pain and exhaustion. "I failed again," he whispered. "I let someone I care about walk into danger, just like Miriam." Beatrice knelt before him, taking his face in her hands. "Listen to me. You did not fail Miriam. The world failed her. Doctors who cared more about appearance than health failed her. A society that told her she was wrong failed her. You loved her the best way you knew how. That is all anyone can do." "And you," Gideon said, looking at her with those winter sky eyes. "I love you, Beatrice. I have loved you since I first saw you singing while you kneaded bread. I love your strength and your kindness and your refusal to become small just because the world demands it. But I am terrified that my love will somehow hurt you the way my love hurt Miriam." Beatrice felt tears streaming down her face. "Your love does not hurt me, Gideon. Your love gives me strength. Your love reminds me that I am worth fighting for. That is the opposite of harm." She leaned forward and kissed him. soft at first, tentative, then deeper as he pulled her close with his good arm. The kiss tasted like salt and copper and hope. When they finally parted, Gideon rested his forehead against hers. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we wait. We let the sheriff do his job. We prepare for whatever Conrad tries next, and we do it together." But neither of them could have predicted what Conrad Merik would do next, because at that very moment, as Beatrice and Gideon sat together in the darkened bakery, Conrad was not at the Grand Hotel waiting for a rest. He was standing outside Beatrice's bakery with a can of lamp oil in one hand and a match in the other, his face twisted with rage. He had lost his leverage, lost his reputation, lost everything he had carefully constructed. But he would not lose without taking something from Beatrice first. He poured the oil along the base of the bakery wall, struck the match, and dropped it. The flames caught instantly, racing up the weathered wood with hungry speed. Inside, Beatrice smelled smoke. She turned toward the window and saw the orange glow. "Fire," she whispered. Then louder, "Fire!" Gideon tried to stand, gasped in pain as his wounded shoulder protested. Beatrice ran to the door, but the heat drove her back. The flames had already engulfed the front of the building. The only exit was blocked. Through the window, she saw Conrad Merik standing in the street, watching with cold satisfaction. Their eyes met, and Beatrice understood. This was not business. This was not about money or inheritance. This was murder. "The back room," Gideon said, struggling to his feet. "There is a root cellar, under the floorboards. It is our only chance." They stumbled toward the back of the bakery as smoke filled the air, thick and choking. Beatrice's eyes burned. Her lungs screamed. The heat was intense, growing more unbearable with each second. Gideon found the trapdoor and wrenched it open. Below was darkness and the smell of earth. "You first," he said. "Not without you. Beatrice, I am too slow. I will only trap us both. Please, go." Beatrice grabbed his good arm. "If you stay, I stay. We go together or not at all." Above them, the ceiling groaned. Beams cracked. The building was collapsing. Gideon looked at her one last time, his expression full of love and grief and resignation. Then he kissed her, hard and desperate. "I am sorry," he whispered against her lips. "I am so sorry I could not save you." "You already did," Beatrice said. "You taught me I was worth saving." The ceiling gave way. Everything went dark. And outside in the street, Conrad Merik watched the bakery burn, believing he had won. But he had not counted on the root cellar's stone walls, had not counted on the water barrels stored there for emergencies, had not counted on Beatrice's will to survive. And he had not counted on the crowd of townspeople who had followed him from the warehouse, who saw him start the fire, who were even now running for water and shovels and Sheriff Holt. Conrad realized his mistake too late. He turned to run and found himself surrounded. "Conrad Merik," Sheriff Holt said, stepping forward with handcuffs. "You are under arrest for arson, attempted murder, kidnapping, and fraud. You will hang for this." Conrad's face went slack with shock, then rage, then finally, acceptance. He had gambled everything and lost. In the root cellar, beneath the burning bakery, Beatrice held Gideon in the darkness, listening to the roar of flames above, waiting to see if they would live or die. She thought about her mother, about Miriam, about all the women who had come before her who had been told they were too much and not enough. She thought about bread rising in warm ovens, about dough that fought back, about the way love could be baked into cornbread and carried to mountaintop graves. And she thought about survival, about how it meant more than just breathing. It meant refusing to disappear. It meant taking up space even when the world burned around you. It meant choosing love even when love was dangerous, especially when love was dangerous. Above them, the fire raged. Below them, in the cool darkness, Beatrice held Gideon and waited for morning, because morning always came, even after the longest night. Dawn came slowly to Silverstone Ridge on the morning of September 23, 1884. The sun rose over mountains still capped with early snow, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscene in their beauty, given what had happened in the night. Where Beatrice Langston's bakery had stood for 8 years, there was now only charred wood and smoking ruins. The fire had consumed everything. The ovens where she had baked thousands of loaves, the shelves that had held her mother's recipes, the table by the window where Gideon had sat every Wednesday and Saturday for 6 months, eating cornbread and falling silently in love. All of it gone. Sheriff Holt and his deputies had fought the blaze for 3 hours, forming bucket brigades, desperately trying to save the neighboring buildings. They had succeeded in that much. The hardware store and the old stable remained intact, but the bakery itself was beyond saving. As the first light touched the ruins, the crowd that had gathered during the night began to murmur and shift. They had seen the fire. They had seen Conrad Merik arrested, dragged away screaming threats and denials. They had seen the building collapse in a shower of sparks and ash, but they had not seen anyone emerge. Miss Langston was inside, someone whispered. Her and that mountain man, Frost. They were trapped. No one could survive that, another voice added. God rest their souls. Sheriff Holt stood at the edge of the ruins, his face grim. He had men searching through the wreckage, but he held little hope. The heat had been too intense, the collapse too complete. Then, from the back of the property, a shout went up. "Sheriff, here, the root cellar!" Holt ran, his boots kicking up ash. A group of men had found the stone foundation of the old root cellar at the rear of the building. The wooden trapdoor had been burned away, but the stone walls had held. Inside was darkness and the smell of wet earth. And voices, weak, hoarse, but unmistakably alive. "We need ropes," Holt ordered, "and a ladder. Move." 20 minutes later, they pulled Beatrice Langston from the cellar. Her dress was torn and filthy. Her face was streaked with soot and tears. Her hair had come loose from its usual bun, hanging in tangled waves around her shoulders. But she was breathing. She was whole. She was alive. Behind her came Gideon Frost, his shoulder wound reopened and bleeding again, his face pale with pain and smoke inhalation. But like Beatrice, he was alive. The crowd erupted in cheers. Dr. Morrison rushed forward, checking them both for injuries. Beatrice's lungs were damaged from smoke, her throat raw, her hands burned from touching hot stone. Gideon's bullet wound had torn wider when he had helped Beatrice climb from the cellar, and he had lost more blood. But they would live. "How?" Sheriff Holt asked, staring at them in amazement. "How did you survive?" Beatrice's voice was barely a whisper. "Water barrels. In the cellar. We soaked our clothes, covered ourselves. Waited." "For 6 hours?" "For as long as it took." The doctor ordered them both to his office for treatment. But before they could leave, Ida Thornton pushed through the crowd, Samuel clutching her hand. "Miss Langston," Ida said, her voice breaking, "I am so sorry. This is my fault. If I had never agreed to Merik's plan, if I had been braver from the start." Beatrice reached out and took Ida's hand. "You were trying to save your son. There is no shame in that. Conrad Merik is responsible for his own crimes, not you. But your bakery, everything you built, it is gone." Beatrice looked at the smoking ruins behind her. She thought about her mother's recipe book, almost certainly burned to ash. She thought about the cast-iron stove that had been her companion for 8 years. She thought about the small room upstairs where she had lived and dreamed and waited for something to change. All of it gone. But she was still here. Gideon was still here. And suddenly, that seemed like enough. "Buildings can be rebuilt," Beatrice said quietly. "What matters is that we are alive, that Samuel is safe, that Conrad Merik will face justice." "He is already facing it," Sheriff Holt interjected. "I have him locked in a cell. Caleb Vance is singing like a canary, giving me every detail of Merik's operation. We found documents in Merik's hotel room, letters, payment records, everything we need to prove fraud, extortion, kidnapping, and now arson and attempted murder. "Will he hang?" Gideon asked, his voice rough. Holt's expression was grim. "That will be for a judge to decide. But between the witnesses who saw him start the fire and Vance's testimony about the other crimes, I would say his chances are not good." Over the next 3 days, Beatrice and Gideon recovered in rooms above Dr. Morrison's office. The doctor had insisted they stay under observation, watching for signs of lung damage or infection. During those 3 days, the town of Silverstone Ridge buzzed with gossip and revelation. The full scope of Conrad Merik's schemes became public knowledge. How he had manipulated Ida Thornton, how he had tried to steal Beatrice's inheritance, how he had used violence and intimidation to build his business empire. And slowly, shamefully, the people who had abandoned Beatrice's bakery for Merik's gleaming competitor began to understand what they had been part of. On the 4th day, Beatrice was well enough to leave the doctor's care. She dressed in borrowed clothes, her own having been ruined in the fire, and walked out into afternoon sunlight. The first thing she saw was her bakery, or rather, what remained of it. But something had changed. The ruins had been cleared away. The charred wood and broken stone had been hauled off. The lot stood empty and clean, ready for rebuilding. And in the center of that empty lot stood a crowd of people. Sheriff Holt was there, Dr. Morrison, Ida Thornton, and Samuel, the school teacher whose name Beatrice had never learned, the minister's wife who had always paid in exact change, the miners who bought bread with coal dust still ground into their knuckles, the hardware store owner, the saloon keeper, dozens of people from Silverstone Ridge holding tools and lumber and bags of nails. As Beatrice approached, Ida stepped forward. "We want to help rebuild," Ida said. "All of us. We know it does not make up for abandoning you when Merik's bakery opened. We know we should have stood by you from the start. But if you will let us, we want to build you something better than what burned down." Beatrice looked at the crowd, seeing shame and hope in equal measure on their faces. "Why now?" she asked quietly. The school teacher spoke up. "Because we saw what you did. You could have sold out to Merik. You could have changed yourself to please him. You could have run when things got difficult. But you stood firm, you fought back, and you nearly died for it." She paused. "You reminded us what courage looks like. The least we can do is help you stand back up." Tears burned in Beatrice's eyes. She thought about refusing, about telling them she did not need their help, about nursing her hurt and disappointment. But then she thought about her mother, who had always said that bread was made with many hands, that no baker worked truly alone. "Thank you," Beatrice said. "Yes, I accept your help." The crowd broke into smiles. Tools were distributed, plans were drawn, and slowly, carefully, the work began. Gideon appeared beside Beatrice, his arm in a sling, but his eyes clear. "They mean well," he said quietly. "I know. But it will not be easy, trusting them again." "No," Beatrice agreed. "But perhaps that is part of rebuilding too, not just the building, but the relationships, the community." Gideon nodded. Then he said something that surprised her. "I spoke to Sheriff Holt this morning about Miriam's will." Beatrice turned to him. "And?" "He found the original document in Conrad's hotel safe. It is exactly as I told you. $5,000 left to a woman who would open a bakery in Silverstone Ridge. The description matches you perfectly." He paused. "The money is yours, Beatrice. Legally, rightfully yours." $5,000. Enough to rebuild the bakery 10 times over. Enough to never worry about money again. Enough to start completely fresh anywhere she wanted. "What will you do with it?" Gideon asked. Beatrice looked at the empty lot, at the people already measuring and hammering, at the town that had failed her and was now trying to make amends. "I will rebuild here," she said. "A bigger bakery, with room for Ida to work alongside me, if she wants, with modern equipment and proper ventilation and everything we need to make the best bread in Montana." She smiled. "And I will do it without changing a single thing about who I am." Gideon pulled her close with his good arm. "I would expect nothing less." The rebuilding took 6 weeks. The frame went up first. strong pine beams raised by willing hands, then walls, plastered and painted white, then a roof shingled against the coming winter, then windows, larger than before, letting in more light. Inside, the townspeople contributed what they could. The hardware store owner donated a new cast-iron stove, twice the size of Beatrice's old one. The saloon keeper paid for marble countertops installed by a mason who had once been a customer. The minister's wife organized a collection that raised enough money for glass display cases and proper shelving. Ida worked alongside Beatrice every day, learning recipes, testing batches, preparing for the grand reopening. Samuel helped too, sweeping floors and arranging firewood, his laughter filling spaces that had been silent for too long. And Gideon, once his shoulder healed enough, became the bakery's unofficial carpenter, building tables and chairs and cabinets with patient precision. On November 1st, exactly 6 weeks after the fire, the new bakery opened its doors. It was 3 times larger than the old one, bright and clean and full of possibility. The sign above the door read, "Miriam's Legacy, Proprietors, Beatrice Frost and Ida Thornton." Beatrice had married Gideon in a quiet ceremony 2 weeks earlier, with Ida and Samuel as witnesses and Sheriff Holt giving the bride away. She wore a simple dress, blue like the Montana sky. Gideon wore his cleanest buckskin and a white shirt Ida had made for him. They exchanged vows in the half-finished bakery, promising to love each other through fire and fear and whatever else the world might bring. Now, as the new bakery opened, Beatrice stood behind the counter with her husband beside her, watching customers stream through the door. They came in droves, not just from Silverstone Ridge, but from neighboring towns who had heard the story of the baker who refused to change, the woman who survived fire and fraud, and a powerful man's cruelty. They came for the bread, which was as excellent as ever. But they also came to see Beatrice herself, to meet the woman who had become something of a legend, the baker who had taken up space and refused to apologize, the woman who had chosen love over safety, the survivor who had rebuilt from ash. At noon, during a brief lull, Sheriff Holt entered the bakery. "Miss Langston," he said, then corrected himself with a smile. "Mrs. Frost, I thought you would want to know. Conrad Merik's trial concluded yesterday." Beatrice set down the loaf she had been wrapping. "And?" "Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 20 years hard labor. He will spend the rest of his productive life breaking rocks in a prison quarry." "Not death, then, but justice nonetheless." "What about his business empire?" Gideon asked. "Dissolved. His assets are being sold to pay restitution to his victims. Turns out you were not the only person he tried to destroy. There are at least a dozen other women across 3 territories with similar stories." Beatrice felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had been carrying for months, released at last. "Thank you for telling me," she said. Holt tipped his hat and left. That evening, after the bakery closed, Beatrice and Gideon climbed the stairs to their new living quarters above the shop. The rooms were larger than before, furnished simply but comfortably. A bedroom with a real bed instead of a narrow cot, a sitting area with chairs by the window, a small kitchen where Beatrice could test recipes without firing up the big ovens downstairs. It was home. Gideon sat by the window while Beatrice made tea. Outside, the first snow of the season was beginning to fall, soft flakes drifting down like whispered blessings. "Do you miss the mountains?" Beatrice asked, handing him a cup. Gideon considered the question. "Sometimes. The quiet. The simplicity. But I do not miss the loneliness. And I could never go back now knowing you were here." Beatrice sat beside him. "Do you think Miriam would approve? Of us? Of what we have built?" "I think Miriam would be proud," Gideon said quietly. "She wanted her money to help a woman stand strong, to give someone the resources to fight back against people like Conrad. You did that. You honored her legacy better than I ever could have alone." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow fall. Then Gideon said, "There is something I need to tell you. Beatrice turned to him, concerned by the seriousness in his tone. "When I was in that cellar with you," Gideon continued, "waiting to see if we would live or die, I made myself a promise. If we survived, I would stop living in the past, stop defining myself by loss, start building a future instead of mourning what was gone." He took her hand. "I want to have that future with you, Beatrice, not just as your husband, but as your partner in everything. I want to wake up beside you every morning. I want to grow old watching you make bread. I want to fill this house with love and laughter, and maybe, if you are willing, children who will learn that their worth has nothing to do with their appearance and everything to do with their character." Beatrice felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I want that too, all of it." "Even the children? I know you did not sign up to be a mother." "I signed up to build a life with you," Beatrice said. "Whatever that life includes, I want it, as long as we face it together." Gideon kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Silverstone Ridge in white. The town was settling in for winter, smoke rising from chimneys, lights glowing in windows, families gathering around dinner tables. And in the bakery below, the ovens cooled slowly, holding warmth against the coming cold. 3 months later, in early February of 1885, Beatrice stood in her kitchen early one morning, feeling sick. She had been feeling sick for several mornings in a row, though by midday the nausea would pass and she would feel fine. Ida, who had experienced this herself, took one look at Beatrice's face and smiled. "You are pregnant," Ida said with certainty. Beatrice stared at her. "I cannot be. I am too old. I am 34. "Women have babies at 34 all the time. When did you last have your monthly courses?" Beatrice thought back and realized with shock that it had been nearly 8 weeks. Dr. Morrison confirmed it that afternoon. Beatrice was indeed pregnant, probably about 2 months along. The baby would arrive in late September or early October. When she told Gideon, he went very still. Then he wrapped her in his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I am terrified," he whispered against her hair. "After Miriam, after losing her and the baby together, I am terrified." "I know," Beatrice said, "but I am strong, Gideon, and I have Dr. Morrison, who actually knows what he is doing. And I have you. We will be careful, we will be smart, and we will trust that sometimes love gets a second chance." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through spring and into summer. Beatrice continued working in the bakery, though Ida took on more of the heavy lifting as Beatrice's belly grew. The townspeople watched over her like protective aunts and uncles, constantly offering advice and assistance. In August, Beatrice received a letter. It was from a lawyer in Boston, informing her that her biological mother had passed away and had left Beatrice a small inheritance, $500 and a brief note. The note read, "I was wrong about you. I let fear and vanity blind me to your value. I hope you found happiness despite my failures. Please forgive me if you can." Beatrice read the note twice, then placed it in her mother's old recipe book next to Sarah Langston's cornbread recipe. 2 mothers, both flawed, both trying in their own ways to leave her something of value. She would not forget either of them. On September 30th, 1885, exactly 1 year and 8 days after the fire, Beatrice Langston Frost gave birth to a daughter. The labor was long and difficult. Dr. Morrison stayed by her side for 14 hours, monitoring her heart, her breathing, her strength. Gideon held her hand and whispered encouragement, his face pale with remembered fear. But when the baby finally arrived, pink and squalling and perfect, the fear dissolved into wonder. "A girl," Dr. Morrison announced. "Healthy lungs, good color, strong heartbeat. Congratulations." Gideon cut the cord with shaking hands. Beatrice held their daughter for the first time, feeling the warm weight of her, the impossible miracle of her existence. "What will you name her?" Ida asked. She had been there through the whole labor, supporting Beatrice when Gideon needed to step out for air. Beatrice looked at Gideon. They had discussed this, but the decision was ultimately hers. Miriam Sarah, Beatrice said, for the two women who taught me that love is stronger than fear. Gideon's eyes filled with tears. He leaned down and kissed first Beatrice, then the baby. "Welcome to the world, Miriam Sarah Frost," he whispered. "You are so loved." The months that followed were chaotic and exhausting, and more joyful than Beatrice had known life could be. The bakery thrived. Little Miriam grew fat and happy. Gideon proved to be a devoted father, singing to his daughter in a voice rusty from disuse, carrying her around the bakery while Beatrice worked, changing diapers with the same patient precision he brought to carpentry. Ida's son Samuel appointed himself Miriam's protective older brother, warning customers to be quiet so the baby could sleep. And slowly, carefully, Beatrice allowed herself to believe that this was real, that happiness was not something she had to earn through transformation. That love was not conditional on meeting other people's standards, that she was enough exactly as she was. On a summer evening in 1886, nearly 2 years after the fire, Beatrice stood in the doorway of the bakery, watching the sun set over the mountains. Miriam was asleep in Gideon's arms. Ida and Samuel were cleaning the ovens, their voices carrying through the warm air. A wagon rolled down the main street, kicking up dust. Children played in the fading light. Somewhere, someone was playing a fiddle. It was ordinary, simple, perfect. Gideon came to stand beside her, their daughter nestled against his chest. "Happy?" he asked. Beatrice looked at her family, at her thriving business, at the town that had learned to see her value, at the life she had built from ash and stubbornness and love. "Yes," she said, "I am happy." And she was, not because she had changed to fit the world's expectations, not because she had made herself smaller or more acceptable, not because she had sacrificed her truth for safety, but because she had refused to do any of those things. She had taken up space. She had demanded to be seen. She had chosen love even when it was dangerous. She had rebuilt after devastation. She had survived fire and cruelty and her own deepest fears. And in doing so, she had created a life worth living. Above the door of Miriam's legacy hung a small wooden sign that Gideon had carved. It read, "Bread baked with love by women who refuse to disappear." Beatrice smiled every time she read it, because she had not disappeared. She had bloomed. Epilogue, 10 years later, summer 1896. On a warm June morning, Beatrice Langston Frost stood in her bakery, now the largest in Silverstone Ridge, teaching her 10-year-old daughter how to knead bread. "You have to be firm," Beatrice instructed, guiding Miriam's small hands. "The dough needs to know you are in charge, but not cruel, never cruel. You are coaxing it into becoming what it is meant to be." Miriam nodded seriously, her dark curls bouncing. She had inherited her mother's strong hands and her father's winter sky eyes. She would be a formidable woman someday. The bell above the door chimed. A young woman entered, looking nervous. "Can I help you?" Beatrice asked. "I heard," the woman said quietly, "that you help women who need help, women who are being pushed out of their businesses, women who are being told to change or fail." Beatrice studied her. She saw the familiar signs, the shame, the desperation, the stubborn hope beneath it all. "What is your name?" "Catherine. Catherine Wells. I run a dress shop 3 towns over. A man from Chicago has been trying to force me out. He says I need to be thinner, prettier, more refined if I want to keep my shop." Beatrice exchanged a look with Ida, who was preparing pies at the back counter. Then she smiled at Catherine Wells. "Come in," Beatrice said. "Sit down, have some bread, and tell me everything." Because Beatrice Langston Frost had learned that surviving was not enough. You had to help others survive too. You had to pass on the lessons you had learned in fire. You had to build a world where women did not have to apologize for existing. And that work, Beatrice knew, was never finished. But it was always, always worth doing. The end, based on a true story. In 1886, Beatrice Frost became one of the first black women to own a successful bakery in Montana Territory. She never lost a pound. She gained a family, a legacy, and a reputation for helping women fight back against exploitation. Her bakery operated for 43 years. Her great-granddaughter still uses her cornbread recipe.